So our project was on Hollywood stereotypes. Their thesis is movies portray true and false stereotypes of Islamic people and people from the Middle East.
So the movie that we watched is called Real Bad Arabs. It is a documentary film which is an extension of the book wrote by Jack Shanahan. And in the movie, he talks about how Hollywood corrupts and manipulates the image of Arabs. And the film indicates that the slander of Arabs has existed for a really long time, since the early days of silent movie. And Jack find a series of demeaning images of Arabs through a lot of American movie that he studied. Those movies shows Arabs neither bandits, savages, or terrorists. And the Real Bad Arabs tries to explain the motivation behind these stereotypes, and also it tells us how those stereotypes developed at the key points of America. And also it includes how it affects on the United States and why it is so important today. In the movie, it also argues that politics has a big role in affecting Hollywood's images of Arabs. But the fact is, Hollywood and politics are actually doing a two-way affecting. The most important thing is that some images of Arabs are distorted, and this causes a poisoning in the mind of young generations, such as us. And those movies characterize Arabs with really harmful descriptions. And take us, for example, in the year that we born, there were a lot of conflicts between America and Arabs. And I believe those news, movies, were those social media things influence your perspective of Arabs in some degrees. The Western civilization admittedly confess how these views directly attack Arabs' humanity. And there are some images taking shape in several certain patterns, and the director plays them again and again, and which heavily abuse Arabs' morals. Here are a few examples. The first one would be Arab's land. As we mentioned, Arab's land, people usually come up with desert, tents, camels, those creepy images, which are remotely far away from civilization and science. But the truth is, they're just as advanced as civilization as we are. And people usually depict Arab women as neither belly dancer or just suicidal. But the truth is that they works just as they're just as other women in this world, and they works in their intelligence. Also, the worst is that sometimes some director they just inject Arabs randomly into some movies. For example, there are a couple movies that is not related to Islam or any Arab people, but they just set up a Arab characters who plays a really bad role in the movie.
So there's a lot of movies that use stereotypes, and one of the big ones is Delta Force, and it's about a plane that's flying from Rome to New York City, and it's hijacked by Palestinians, and the Palestinians torture the passengers, especially the Jewish ones, and they take all the passengers' passports and are like, oh, find the passport with the most Jewish name so they can torture them. And this is saying that just because Palestinians are on a flight, that they're terrorists and they're going to hijack the plane, which isn't true. Like, many people from the Middle East fly planes and obviously don't hijack them. And it's also bad towards Jews, saying that like they're pretty much demoted and like they're the easiest to torture. And one of the main movies is Rules of Engagement, and this is about Marines that open fire on Muslims. So U.S. Marines go to Yemen to evacuate American soldiers, but end up open firing on a crowd of civilian Muslims. And Tommy Lee Jones is in this movie. And after the firing, he goes to Yemen to investigate the situation. And he sees a one-legged girl, or civilian, and who leads him to the hospital where all the civilians are. He finds an audio tape saying that the U.S. Marines are responsible for this outcome. And this is saying that just because they're civilians that are Muslims, that like the U.S. Marines thought that they were bad and like gonna harm them in some way, but isn't true. Like they're just civilians living their own life. Even though there are movies that use stereotypes badly, there are movies that show accurate portrayals of the Middle East, and one of them is A Perfect Murder, and it's about an American family and they're like a plan to murder each other, and an Arab American detective steps in and helps the family and acts as a friend. And this shows that not all Arabs are bad, and some of them, or most of them, can help families, and especially in America. And another movie is Kingdom of Heaven, which shows the religious side of it, peace between Muslims and Christians in Jerusalem. And a man in Jerusalem goes into a church after fighting and picks up a icon that's a Christian icon and respectfully puts it back on the altar. And this shows that just because there's like different religions, they can respect each other. And when this movie was shown in theaters over in the Middle East, the entire audience stood up and applauded because they loved the relationship that was shown in the accurate portrayal.
So I focused on the topic of Hollywood giving false stereotypes to Arabic men and women. So last week I asked you guys for a few stereotypes that you guys know of Arabic people, and some of them were they're evil, obsessed with gold and money, terrorists, and rude and very stupid. So the first stereotypical Arab man I found was the evil Arab man. He was usually a terrorist who liked killing people, and he went after American people. A few years ago, I remember I watched a movie called The Son of Pink Panther, where the terrorist group, or the bad people, were working for a terrorist group who were Arabic, and that is very irrational because it shows that people throughout the world think that most terrorist groups are Arabic. The next stereotypical Arab man I found was the silly Arab man. Here in this picture, you can see this man is holding money with like gold rings and a cigar and like gold glasses. And usually you don't see such Arabic people on the streets. This person is usually like at a club chasing after women and drinking most of the time. He's very shallow, naive, and fun, and does many stupid things. The third stereotypical Arabic man I found was the nomadic barbaric man. He usually has like a camel and is away from civilization. This man could be like a king living in a palace, or could be very poor and living in a tent in the middle of the desert. And the last stereotypical Arab man I found was the arrogant Arab man. This person is very rude to women, usually nervous, and shows no emotion. And
Okay, so the stereotypes found in movies for women. So in the two pictures, you did the same woman with the same background. And one of them is portrayed in a sexual way, and she's dancing for men that are drinking for money and such. And then this one is very covered up, the typical, thinking that she obeys her husband. And so you could reference this to a double-sided coin, where it's the same woman but two different sides. And then there's the outlooks, reviews, criticism, and how we see the Arabs today. So these are the critiques that big-time critique people did for the movies. So starting off with the Delta Force. So Variety described it as an exercise in wish fulfillment for those favored using force instead of diplomacy, and it was unashamed. So that's showing like how vulgar it is And then True Lies, even though there were positive reviews for it, the film was criticized as sexist, cruel, or even misogynistic. And so perceived as it's conveying a strong anti-Arab or anti-Muslim prejudice. And so right there it says in the hard print that that's not how it's supposed to work. And then rules of engagement. So this is probably the most stereotypic movie to Arab people. And this had a 30% rating from Rotten Tomatoes. And so this is probably the most racist film ever made against Arabs by Hollywood. And this is from the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. And so that's like pretty high up there. And even though the King of Morocco signed it, saying it was okay, it still shows he probably did it for money. And so here's a circle of stereotypes about how it gets around. So usually it starts off with a major occurrence, and then it goes into the media where you hear it on the news. And then it'll go into politics. There's debates on what to do or what not to do. Next will be protests, what people believe, and they can be peaceful or they can be pretty harmful. Then it'll go into a stereotypical movie like True Lies or The Delta Force. And then the critics / assumptions. So the critics will say their opinion on it, and then once you've read that, you'll take it in your own opinion, and then you'll tell your friends your version of it and how you saw it. Then there'll be a book or an illustration for amusement, and that's usually pretty racist, and then it'll come back to another major occurrence.
So in conclusion, we came up with 4 ideas that can help us take away the stereotypes from the Arabic people. The first one was not getting fooled by like foolish stuff from movies. So stuff like they're obsessed with money and they're obsessed with blondes. Not spreading false information on Arabs. So if you watch a movie or if you read something, don't start telling everyone. The third one was understanding that only 1% of Arabs are bad, and saying no to wrong information and ideas. So if we do this, we may be able to stop these stereotypes.